over what we learned on Friday and then continue. So Friday we spoke about the concept of fasting, of a person um, not eating so much, myrivatzmai, hungering himself. If that's a word. I don't think that's a word. Um, a person not eating so much in the years of famine. And if he does that, Rabbi Yehuda Amarav says he is saved from a misa meshuna, from a strange death. What that means is he doesn't die on his bed, dies from some other um, negative negative cause.
Depriving oneself. Depriving
oneself from food. Okay, that's a good word. So if a person does that in the years of famine, he's saved from the misa meshuna. And it brings a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Bera'av padcha mimaves." In the time of famine, Hashem saved this person from death, and it's talking about over there all different types of situations that Hashem saves them. The Gemara is bothered with the meaning of that pasuk because what it sounds like it's saying is in the time of famine, Hashem will save him from not dying from famine. But what about all the pain of famine? It should say, in a time of famine, Hashem will save him from the pain, not just from death. He'll save him from pains of famine, that he shouldn't have to suffer. That would be the appropriate wording. So that's what the Gemara says, Meira'av mi boile. It's actually a complicated Gemara. The Marsha has to explain it, because otherwise you normally would understand that instead of bira of, it should say meirav, but that doesn't that's not the meaning of the Gemara, and it wouldn't really prove it. In other words, it's not such a strong question, meirav or birav. It's really the same thing. Marsha explains that it's actually saying that what it should say is, instead of mimaves, it should say meirav. I'm actually 5 lines from the top of the page on page 11a. I'm just going over it outside, but if you want to look inside, you can see what I'm talking about. That it brings a pasuk over there of Bera'av Padcha Mimavas. It's a pasuk in Job, and what it should say is, in other words, logically, the pasuk should say Bera'av Padcha Meira'av. In the time of famine, Hashem saved you from all the issues and pains and suffering that a famine brings. Instead of saying from death, because from death, it sounds like he's just saving you from death, but he's not saving you from all those suffering of famine. So because it should say Meira'av, the Gemara says it doesn't say Meirav because it's hinting to you some other law. What is it hinting to you? That Bira'av Padcha Mimaves, by acting, by depriving oneself in a way of famine, you have been redeemed from a misa meshuna, from a strange death. That's what the pasuk is hinting to you. That when you act in a way of famine, in other words, everyone else is suffering from famine, in a year of famine, and you also deprive yourself of food. In other words, you minimize your eating because of everyone's in the time of famine. You will be saved from a misa meshuna. So that's the lima, that's how it's learned over here from that pasuk. Then Reish Lakish says that it's prohibited for a person to be meshamish mitasai, to have relations during the years of famine. Brought a pasuk from Yosef. That Yosef, it says he had his kids before the famine started. And implying like maybe you're not supposed to have children during the year of famine because you're not supposed to have relations in the years of famine and time of famine. And the Brisa then said, then it brings a Brisa that we learned that if a person doesn't have children, then they would be allowed to have children during a time of famine. Now, the simple understanding would be that it means if you don't have a boy and a girl, because according to Jewish law, the real mitzvah of having children is having a boy and a girl. That's not everyone is able to, but they try at least. It's a mitzvah to have a boy and a girl. So if a person doesn't have a boy and a girl, they would be allowed to have relations during famine because they are trying to have a boy and a girl to fulfill the mitzvah of pru'ervu. They don't have a boy or girl yet, then they would be allowed to have, they maybe have a mitzvah to have relations and try to have a boy and a girl. Now, the only problem with that is that sort of contradicts what it just says before, that Yosef, and this was Yehuda's question on Friday, that sort of contradicts itself because Yosef didn't have a girl yet. He only had two boys. So it says he has two boys, and he didn't have relations in the time of famine. Right? That's what the pasuk is implying. Like Yosef had two kids before because he wouldn't have relations during the time of famine. He had these two boys before famine. Right? He had Ephraim and Manasseh. But what about a girl? He didn't have a girl. So it would seem that that he was allowed to have relations. Maybe should have had relations. That's an interesting question because it seems to be a contradictory right in itself. You might be able to answer that Yosef knew how long the famine was going to be. He knew that the famine was only going to be 7 years. So you might be able to answer, I'm just throwing this thought that since he knew the end date of the famine, so for him, he knew how old his wife was. He knew how old he was. He knew that after that, the famine has a limit. And he knew that because it's only 7 years, maybe it's not a problem for him to, like he expects to have more children afterwards. Maybe for him, it wasn't a problem. Normally, you don't know the end date of a famine. So person has to try to have a girl. It doesn't have a girl yet. Boys, just throwing a little thought there. That's a thought. Now, the commentaries do struggle with the other question that we asked, and that was that Yocheved was born during the time of famine in the same year. So, in other words, Yosef didn't have kids that year, but in the time of famine because he wasn't having relations. It seems like the Gemara understands it that way. But Yocheved's father, Levi, he did have relations, and he had Yocheved during that year. They had during the second year of famine, he had relations because she was born then. She was born between the chaimet, between the walls. In other words, she was born en route. And Taisus asked this question. He says, "What about Levi?" So Taisus answers that it's not usher. It's only chasidus, midas chasidus. Now, if you say it's a midas chasidus, then it sort of answers the question about. In other words, it's not a halacha that you're not allowed to have relations. It's a midas chasidus. It's going beyond the letter of the law. The problem with that answer is that it just seems surprising that Levi was not going to do beyond the letter of the law, especially because he's called leish chasidecha, right? It says in V'zais habracha, tumecha ve'urecha leish chasidecha, that the Urim v'Tumim go to the person who is a chassid, like he's going beyond the letter of the law. So it sounds that Levi should be doing an act of chassidus. So it does sound surprising that Levi wouldn't do it. Yeah, Yosef was extra machmir, and Levi wasn't. So the other problem is that it also says the Gemara uses the term Asr Adam l'shamish mitasei. Reish Lakish says it's prohibited, and then Taisus jumps and says it's not prohibited. It's a midas chasidus. So that also sounds a little surprising. How do you learn Taisus? Taisus tells us it's only a midas chasidus, which means it's beyond the letter of the law. You're not obligated to, but the Gemara does use the word asr. So to answer that question, some say, the word usher sometimes is used not in the full sense of the word, that it means fully prohibited. It means that it's there's reason not to. Like according to Chassidus, it's usher. According to a person acts beyond the letter of the law, a person acts like a Chassid, then it would be usher for him. That's one explanation. Another explanation is that the Gemara is saying that it's prohibited nowadays. Before the Torah was given, it was a midas chasidus, and therefore Yosef did it, Levi didn't do it. Now, it still doesn't explain why Levi wasn't machmir. Why didn't Levi do it also? But at least it explains the Gemara, that the Gemara says that it's usher, it's prohibited, and Taisus then says, no, it's a midas chasidus. To answer that question, you could say that the Gemara is talking about nowadays, and the story of Yosef, and the story, over there was a midas chasidus. It was before the Torah was given. There wasn't a problem. Therefore, Levi was able to have relations if he, and it wasn't a problem. Now, Yehuda's question does apply to Taisus. Like, why is Taisus even asking this question if they didn't have if they didn't have girls? Yocheved was born, that was his only girl. That was Levi's only girl. That means he didn't have a girl yet. So why would Taisus even ask this question about Yocheved if you didn't have a girl? It would seem that you're allowed to have relations even after Matan Torah. That's what our Gemara says. So why was Taisus even bothered with this problem? The Yocheved. There's no problem with Yocheved. So the answer that I gave on Friday, which seems to be a good answer, I think, is that there is two opinions. That when are you not allowed to have relations in the years of famine? One opinion is if you don't have a boy or a girl, then you're allowed to have relations because you need to have a mitzvah of pru'ervu to have a boy and a girl. But there is another opinion that says no. The leniency during years of famine is if you have no one, you have no children at all. If you have a child, you're already not allowed to have relations. So according to that, that's maybe how Taisus is understanding it. And in fact, in Shulchan Aruch, there is a Taz that seems to hold that way, that he seems to follow this logic. So maybe Taisus, he sees it in Taisus over here, that would be the reason why Taisus is even bothered with this question, because he doesn't have a girl. Levi didn't have a girl, so Levi was allowed to have relations. Now, what are you going to say about Yosef? Yosef also didn't have a girl, so it would seem that Yosef would be in the same boat. And if he's in the same boat, if Yosef is in the same boat, then why was Yosef not having relations? He also, if Yocheved was allowed to be, they were allowed to have relations, or they weren't allowed to have relations from. In other words, the question is, how did Yocheved have relations? You're not allowed to have relations even if you have a boy. Even if you just have a boy, you're not allowed to have relations. So the question was, what about Yocheved? So on that, Tosfos answers that that Yocheved that it's only a midas chasidus, which would seemingly work. That, in other words, Levi was allowed to have relations because it wasn't prohibited, even if you have a boy already. It's a midas chasidus. Yosef followed this midas chasidus. Levi didn't. A little surprising because we would think Levi would follow it, but that's okay. The only question is either Gemara says asur, and on that you could say that it's only after Matan Torah. So after Matan Torah, it would be prohibited. If a person has a boy, they're not allowed to have relations, according to this opinion. And before Matan Torah, you chose if you wanted to be machmir, midas chasidus, you wanted to do extra, then you could do extra. Yosef did extra. It's midas chasidus. He shouldn't have. After Matan Torah, he wouldn't have been allowed to. But before Matan Torah, before the Torah was given, there it was midas chasidus. You were allowed to, and he could have done that. Yocheved, Levi chose to have relations. Why? It was before Matan Torah. Okay, so that works. Then another interpretation is that that really the law applies to a boy and a girl, and so both were really allowed to have relations because they didn't have a boy and a girl yet. They didn't have girls yet. Levi didn't have girls and Yosef didn't have girls. But Tosfos says that even so, you could act in a midas chasidus. So in other words, is it usher for a person to be meshamish mitasei b'shnei rayvim? Is it prohibited even before Matan Torah? Another way of learning Tosfos is that it is prohibited even before Matan Torah. But if you don't have a girl, then it's not prohibited. But midas chasidus would be that even though you don't have a girl, you could be machmir. So before Matan Torah, which would be the same even after Matan Torah. It didn't matter when it is, but if you don't have a girl, there is a midas chasidus to go above and beyond. But the isser to be meshamish mitasi is if you have a boy and a girl already, then it would be prohibited. But if you have boys, you don't have a girl, you are allowed to have relations before Matan Torah and after Matan Torah. But Yosef was extra machmer, and the Gemara brings a proof that it's usher is because if it wasn't usher, then Yosef, there would be no concept of being machmir. It must be that if a person has a boy and a girl, it's usher, and that's why Yosef, even though he didn't have a girl, he was able to be machmir, and he went above and beyond only because there is a concept, there is a prohibition of having relations if a person does have a boy and a girl. And Levi, of course, wasn't machmir. These are some of the answers. Then we also mentioned some other answers. This is explaining Taisus. That's how to fit the wording into Taisus. But we had another answer. The Ritva says that Yosef didn't know how the Jewish people were doing. In other words, his family. So therefore, he felt it's usher. The Jewish people, they knew that they weren't suffering. So because they weren't suffering, so you don't follow if the Goyim are having a famine, you follow if the Jews are having a famine. So the Yidden, they themselves, they were together, they were fine. So therefore, they were allowed to have relations. Yosef wasn't. Then another answer is that it could be that the night of mikvah is allowed. So Yosef was extra machmir. But Levi, even the night of mikvah, Yosef didn't have relations, but Levi had relations that night because it was his wife's night of mikvah. So therefore, there's in other words, Yosef was extra machmir, but really in halacha you would be allowed to have relations the night of mikvah, which is based on a Yerushalmi. So in other words, sort of like qualifies this law. Now, another interpretation is that in Eretz Yisrael, the famine wasn't as severe. And therefore, because the famine wasn't so severe, in other words, they weren't able to have luxuries in Eretz Yisrael. In all the other countries, they were suffering from real famine. In Eretz Yisrael, they didn't have luxuries. And therefore, he says that Levi didn't have to keep this law. Yosef had to keep the law, and so these are some of the answers that are given in order to explain the conflict, the contradiction here between Yosef and Levi. Okay. Let's see if someone had a question. I forget who. Moshe, you wanted to say something, I think. Moshe?
Yeah. Hold on a second. Yes, Rabbi, I wanted to ask, you've already pretty much explained this as you're going on, but I wanted to say that it's almost like family planning, which is not really permitted as far as I understand, because this is, it seems like it's not permitted,
Right. So the thing is that here we're talking about not having relations. Family planning is they have relations, they just use some type of contraceptive that doesn't make it work. So this is abstinence, and which is also not appropriate. Person is not, there's grounds for divorce if a person doesn't have relations with their wife. It's a mitzvah of Aina. And if the wife doesn't, or the husband doesn't want to have relations with the wife, either one, it could be problematic, and it could be a cause for divorce. According to halacha, it's not appropriate. Now there is a discussion, there is an issue that comes up over here with regard to what happens if a person needs to have relations because of his physical situation and so on. So that, of course, you have to weigh realize that the prohibition of causing seed to go in, for waste is obviously a more severe sin than having relations during the time of famine. So that would be that would be another issue that would seemingly and I believe the Mishnah Berurah brings it down. I didn't look it up, but I believe that that's brought down about. Let me just see over here. Base is Tuf Kuf Ayin Dalid. Tuf Kuf Ayin Dalid 674. It's brought in the Mishnah Berurah 674. Such a law that if a person can't control themselves, then it's better that they should have relations than to. So, like for example, it brings this halacha about Leil Tvila, if it's the night of mikvah, in other words, that she finished menstruating, waited 7 days. So that would be a time to person would be here. Let me read it in this chapter 674. It says a mitzvah to person should deprive themselves in the years of famine, and it's prohibited to have relations except the night of Tevila, and someone who doesn't have children, it would be permissible. Now, at the bottom, he brings down that the Magen Avram prohibits even the night of Tefillah, but other places they permit it. And he also brings down that if a person's children don't keep Shabbos, and a person wants to have children that are going to be frum, he would be considered like someone who doesn't have children. So that's an interesting halacha. If a person's children aren't frum, then they could also have relations in order to have children that are frum. Now, he brings down that a person we should look up chapter Reish Mem 240 and chapter 240. Let me see if I could just pull that up over here. And halacha chapter Shulchan Aruch or Chaim. Oh. 240. Oh no. So in chapter 240, it says over here that a person is, it brings it twice in Shulchan Aruch, actually. It's in chapter 240 and in 675. In 240, it says a person is not allowed to have relations in the years of famine, only for a person who doesn't have kids. And the same thing applies in other tsaras, other suffering are like years of famine. And then it brings on the bottom over here, if his yetzer is meskaber, this is the source that I was quoting before. If his yetzer hara is being stronger and is a chashash, he suspects that it'll come to an issue of destroying seed. So it's brought down. He brings from the Eliyahu Rabbah in the name of Sefer Divrei David to be Mekel. And similarly, it writes in the Sefer base Meir to Evan Ha'ezer. Now, what does it mean he doesn't have children? So he brings down that the meaning of a Shulchan Aruch is that he hasn't fulfilled the mitzvah of Pru or Vu. And therefore, even if he has sons, but if he doesn't have a daughter, it would be permissible. So that seems to be the halacha, the final halacha, even though there is a Taz that holds the other way. And I believe Taisvis might learn that way as well. From this Taisvis, it seems like he might have learned, because otherwise he wouldn't ask this question like that. But the halacha seems to follow the other opinion. Person doesn't have a boy and a girl, then they would be allowed to have relations. And then we saw in Shulchan Aruch that it seems to include also Leil Tvila. If a person's children aren't frum, that was an interesting halacha. Okay, so that is the two places in Shulchan Aruch where it mentions this halacha. Okay, so let's continue. So then did anyone have a question? I thought maybe David, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just trying to remind myself. So Levi was the father of Yocheved.
Yeah.
Okay, there were so many personalities going on. I lost track of who had who, what. Okay, just trying to keep track
Yep.
of everybody. All right.
No problem,
Thanks.
no problem. Okay, so let's continue. So we mentioned about having relations in the years of famine, and then the Gemara talked about being pirish minatzibur, separating oneself from the community when they're suffering, when the community is suffering. So it says in time when the Yidden are sharui in tsar, when they're steeped in pain, and someone separates themselves, and like for example, everyone is suffering from famine, and he goes and he eats. Or everyone is fasting, and he goes and he eats. It says the two angels that are normally malava the person, they normally escort the person. They put their hands on his head and they say, this one should not, this person, they sort of like give him a curse. There's another brisa. It says tzibur is shari b'tzar. They're steeped in pain. Person shouldn't say, I'm going to go and enjoy myself. If he does that, it says sasa and simcha harag bakar shchaitza. He's going to eat the slaughter and have a feast with wine, with meat, wine. And he says machar namos. What do I have to worry? Tomorrow I'm going to die. Now I'm going to enjoy myself. So what does it say afterwards? That person won't be forgiven until he dies. That means he's going to be punished with his punishment will be his death will be the atonement for his sin, and no other his sins won't be atoned until he dies. And so that's the person who separates himself from the community. Then it says that's only for a Beinoni. Interesting. That's for a regular person. In other words, he's worried about death. He says, tomorrow I'm going to die. He knows that he's going to die, but he's not worried. It's not imminent. It's not happening now. So now I'll rejoice, but I do believe in death. I do know that ultimately I am going to have to, there is going to be a calculation. That's a Beinoni. But a Rasha doesn't even think of death. What does he say? Bring me and I'll drink wine, and bring me wine and I'll drink it, and I'll get drunk with beer or old wine, and it'll be tomorrow even greater. So in other words, he doesn't even think about death. The other Beinoni at least thinks about death. This person doesn't even think about death. Let's just rejoice and celebrate, and has no thought about Hashem taking account for any of his actions. And for him, it says the tzaddik gets destroyed, gets killed. Now, what does that mean? Because of the bad, the tzaddik gets taken away. So what does that mean? The tzaddik dies because this guy is evil? So it says because this person, and because of the evil that's being done, first people are not participating in the community's pain. Instead, they're rejoicing, and they don't even think about Hashem. So what happens is the tzaddik feels pain for every suffering that happens in the world. And what this person is doing is not just going to die. He's going to go through a lot of suffering. And what's going to happen to the tzaddik? The tzaddik is going to feel bad for him. That's what a tzaddik does. They always say, why do some tzaddikim, they don't have, so you don't see them suffering so much. You know why? Because they feel the pain of all the other people suffering. So all the other tragedies that are happening, they're feeling all of their pain. So the suffering of the community or the individuals is what bothers them, and therefore Hashem doesn't want them to suffer so much. So ultimately they pass away, so they shouldn't have to suffer the pain of the suffering that Hashem brings. In other words, the guy who's a Beinoni, the person who's an intermediate person, who knows that Hashem is going to judge them in the future, and he just is rejoicing now, and he's not participating in the pain of the community, so he is going to get death. And for him, okay, so he got his punishment. But the other people who are just rejoicing unlimited, they are causing tremendous suffering and pain to the world. That is going to cause the tzaddik to feel pain. So therefore, Hashem has to sometimes take away the tzaddik so that he won't have to go through all of that suffering. That's one pshat. The other pshat that Rashi brings is that the tzaddik might daven for this person. And Hashem doesn't want the tzaddik to daven, so therefore he has to take away his life. Otherwise, he would end up davening for the person, and Hashem doesn't want that. Very interesting philosophical elements to this Gemara, and of how does that work? That someone dies because of someone else, But this is the of course one of those Gemaras that you have to delve into, and it has a lot of secrets in it of how Hashem judges. Yes, David.
Isn't that what happened with Mr. Shalach? Did he die early because
Chanoich.
Oh, Chanach. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Chanach.
That he was.
Yeah.
That was because he was going to be bad.
No,
I think what you're thinking of is Avram died because he shouldn't have to see Esav. That I think is a perfect example. That was probably what you mean. Avram died at 175, even though he should have lived till 180, because all the others were supposed to live till 180, and Yitzchok actually did live till 180, but Abraham died at 175. Why did he die at 175? Because Esav started in a revealed way. He was doing terrible things at the age of 15, and at the age of 15, Avram was 175. So therefore, Hashem took him away so that he shouldn't have to see Esav, his grandson, doing terrible things.
I think there was something also with Mr. Shalach, no?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, Mr. Shalach lived a long life. I don't know how much longer he could have lived. Maybe he died 7. No, we pushed off the flood 7 days for his Avelus. Maybe there's some medrash. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. But he did live a long life, Mr. Shalach. But anyway, maybe there must be some medrash that you're thinking of. I can't argue. There's numerous midrashim, so I'm sure you probably are thinking of a medrash that I'm not thinking. I can't think of now. Okay, but anyway, these are so what the bottom line is that the wicked people, Misa, death doesn't atone for them. They cause there to be a lot of suffering that even a tzaddik can't handle, and they ultimately cause the tzaddik to die. That's basically what it's saying here, and it's all from there just rejoicing and not thinking about Hashem, not thinking about the community. So what should a person do? So the Gemara says, be like Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, what did he do when everyone was suffering? The Melchemes Amalek, this is talking about the war with Amalek. So he had his hands lifted up to Hashem, and they took a stone, they put it under, he sat down on the stone. What do you mean? He sat down on a stone? It's quite an uncomfortable way to sit. But the thing is, he did have cushions. He could have used a cushion or a mattress or cushion. But the thing is, since everyone was involved in pain during the war, he said, I will be together with them, and I'm not going to sit on this cushion. Rather, I will be mishtatef in their tsar. I will participate in their tsar, in their pain.
Rabbi?
And whoever is mitzair himself with the community, he will see the salvation of the community. Yes, Moshe.
Are these considered lamed vavniks, these tzaddikim?
So you're asking a strong question. You're asking, just because Moshe did that, does that mean we all have to do that? Is that what you're asking? No, Moshe Rabbeinu did this. It was on a much higher level. I mean, it wasn't considered a Lamed Vav because Lamed Vav means the hidden. Moshe was revealed. But so I wouldn't use the Lamed Vav concept. I would just say it would seem that, how can you bring a proof from Moshe Rabbeinu? But it doesn't seem to be bringing a proof from Moshe Rabbeinu. It seems to just giving an example that that's similar to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not saying because Moshe did this, you have to do it. It's giving an example. Seemingly, that just like Moshe did this, that's the way a person should act. Now they do question. There is a question on this Gemara about Moshe Rabbeinu, that he was involved in the suffering. I mean, he was right there with the war with Amalek. So why would we say? I mean, he he's not like a person who's on the edge, who's like, or outside and say, well, I have to participate with the community. He is in the community. So why would you say that he would be, in other words, the example of Moshe Rabbeinu is not so exact. Here we're saying, don't separate yourself from the community. And the thing is that Moshe Rabbeinu, he was right there in the war, right by the war. And it's not like he's separating himself from the community. He is part of the community. So there is an answer, there is an explanation that Moshe Rabbeinu, the real Amalek people, the suffering that they were able to cause was only the people who were kicked out of the clouds of glory. So the Amalek was not really effective against anyone that was. So Moshe Rabbeinu was sort of out of the community, and still he participated in the suffering of the community. So in other words, the example of Moshe Rabbeinu is similar to the example that the Gemara is trying to give, that a person, even though he's not exactly in the pain, but he should still participate in the pain of the community. Anyway, so that's this Gemara. The Gemara continues and says, maybe a person will think no one knows. I'm doing things in my house. I'm eating in my house, and no one's putting the shades down. So the thing is, even his stones of his walls, the stones of his house and the walls of his house will be testify against him. As bring a pasuk that it says, "Even mikir tiza kafis me'etzi anena." The stone from the wall will call out, and the kafis is the brick from the wood will answer. Basically, they used to have walls with rows of wood and rows of bricks. So the bricks from the wood, from the eights, from the wood will call out and say, "I'm stolen." That's the case over there that it's referring to. That the stone will say, "I'm a stolen stone, and I'm a stolen brick." So the same thing here is referring to that. It's going to testify that the person has not participated in the community suffering. And Rav Shela mentioned that the two Malachi Asharis, they are the ones that are made on it. Let's start with that Gemara now. Let's begin over there. Devei Rav Shela Amri. We are on page 11a, and we're about, I would say,
which subsection? A2, A1, which one is it?
I'm getting there in a second.
Okay.
For those that have the regular Gemara, we're about 25 lines up from the bottom. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. I would say about 25 lines up from the bottom. Let me just pull the art scroll, and then I will answer your question.
Thank you.
We are in the art scroll, 11a. 11a2 on the second column. 11a2, second column. Devei Reb Shela Amri. The yeshiva of Reb Shela would say. They said, the yeshiva of Reb Shela said that Shnei Malachi Asharis, Hamalavan Leila Adam, the two angels that escort a person, Hein Meidin Olav, they are the ones who are going to testify about the person. And what that means is that the two angels, they separate when the person sins, and people will realize that he is no longer being protected by these two angels. And therefore, the two angels that escort him, they are basically testifying against him, as it says, the angels, he commands to watch you. And those angels, which we were speaking about, that there are two angels that, there's an angel on the right side, angel on the left. They're the two angels that come to a person's house every Friday night, right? And they give them a bracha if the house is ready for Shabbos. The right angel says a bracha. The left angel, who's more of the angel that's a prosecuting angel. The right angel is the advocate angel, and the left angel is the prosecuting angel. So when a person's house is ready for Shabbos, the right angel gives them a bracha. He says, next week you'll also be ready for Shabbos. And when that happens, the left angel is forced to answer Amen, even though he's a prosecuting angel. But here, because the person prepared himself for Shabbos, the left angel has to say Amen. What happens if the person's house is not ready for Shabbos? So the left angel gives them a curse and says, next week, you're also not going to be ready for Shabbos. And the right angel is forced to say Amen. So anyway, these are the two angels that are escorting the person always. In fact, there used to be a custom before a person went to the bathroom, he would say, I'd like to let you both wait outside of the, because the angels wouldn't escort the person into the bathroom. So he would say some term that he would use. Forget the Hebrew for it, but he would basically tell them that you can wait here for a few minutes until because I'm a physical person, I have my bodily needs. So the thing is, nowadays we don't really do that. The only time we really talk to the angels is the Shalom Aleichem on Friday night, but otherwise we don't really do. It's not customary to do this anymore. But it's brought in something mechubadim. Forget the Hebrew word, but it's not done anymore. That you tell the angels to wait. But anyway, these are the two angels that protect the person. So the interesting thing, so Gemara is saying that because the person's not going to be protected, so therefore people will see that he's going to have certain wounds, damage, because they're not protecting him anymore. So people are going to know that he obviously is either not participating in the community issues, or he has other sins. Basically that's going to testify against the person. So and the pasuk is Kim Allah v'tzavalach, that Hashem's angels are always there to protect us. There is a discussion if when we do a mitzvah, you create angels. So are these the angels? And when you do an avera, you create prosecuting angels. So are we talking about those angels, or are we talking about only the two that are escorting the person? There seems to be a discussion between the commentaries if those angels also are like protecting. In other words, the angels that you create from doing mitzvahs, are those the angels that we're referring to, that they protect the person in this world, or are they just they're just angels that advocate for the person? Loss of love, maybe where the person's judged. The Gemara continues and says, Reb Chidka says that the soul of a person testifies. As it says, from the one who lies in your bosom, watch the gates of your mouth, which basically means the pasuk there in Micha says, don't trust a friend, and be careful what you say, even before your wife, because she might reveal things. And the Gemara here seems to be darshaning to say that it refers to the soul, that the soul is what lies in your bosom. In other words, the soul is knows everything, and be careful not to sin, because be careful, shmar pischei picha, be careful of everything you say, and be careful not to do any sins, because the soul will ultimately have to pay the price. It will be a punishment for the soul. Now, or the soul will testify. In other words, guard, pischei picha, maybe. I think what it means is from your neshama, be careful, because it's going to reveal what you've done wrong. So shmar pischei picha, guard the opening of your mouth. Maybe it means of the soul's mouth, so to speak, that the soul will testify. I'm not really sure if that's the meaning here. I'm just guessing that you could add that could be the meaning. I don't know if the Steinsaltz or maybe the Art Scroll might say it that way. Let's just see. Shmar pischei picha, they translating it to mean that the soul Yeah, the verse admonishes one to be particular about his speech, lest his soul report him. No, it doesn't seem to be following that. Okay. I guess I took it too far. It just says, be careful of your speech because your soul will testify about it. Even the soul. No, I think that is meaning this. The Bryce extends this idea to the soul. Even one's soul will betray his most intimate secrets. No, I guess they're not learning it that way. Okay. So anyway, in any event, what it means is that the from the person's soul, he has to be careful of anything that he says, and any sin that he does, of course, would even be worse. Yes, David.
Yeah, I was looking up Mr. Shalach. So
Ah.
if you look in Bereshis,
Yeah.
Parak Zion,
Yeah.
and Pasuk Daled,
Uh-huh.
and the Rashi there, and
Uh-huh.
it brings from Gemara 108b. And the Rashi there says that the 7 days of mourning for Mr. Shalach, for Hashem, had consideration for his honor and delayed the retribution. He waited another 7 days.
Right, to push off the right. Push it off the flood.
And so it wasn't the Medrash, it was actually from the Gemara, from Sanhedrin B, and from Rashi.
Yeah, but that's not an example. That story is not an example of someone that did he die early because of the sins of the community? That's not a story of dying early. That's why I didn't like that. That's why I didn't think that was what you were referring to. I think you're referring to for example.
Rabbi, we have to
that pushed off the.
That's me. I got a lot of kids here. Sorry, my grandchildren just came. Sorry.
Okay. Anyway, so that's why I still don't think that is a good example. Okay. Anyway, bottom line is we are up to over here. Some say the the limbs of a person testify about him, as it says in Isaiah, "Ba'atem edai nom Hashem." You are my witnesses, says Hashem, and it's referring to the people, the Jewish people, and the way the Gemara is understanding it is it means everyone's limb it testifies. In other words, v'atem edai. A varav shaladam says atem edai. You are my witnesses, and I guess it should say you are my witness, or referring to each person. You are my witnesses means all the limbs of a person are witnesses. Okay, now we've concluded this little piece of Gemara. Now we come to the concept of reward and punishment. So the pasuk says in Ha'azinu, next Gemara, Kel Emuna v'yei novel, says Hashem is a God of trustworthiness and there is no crookedness. He is righteous and yasher. So the Brisa explains that, or actually this is a continuation of the Brisa, but it talks now, in other words, it's the Brisa is continuing. It mentioned Rav Shela, and then it comes in and continues into a new topic really about reward and punishment. So it says Kel Amuna Ve'Navel. Kel Amuna is Kishem Shenefron Min HaRashoyim, the same way that we punish the wicked, Lo Elam Haba, in the world to come. Afilo Alavera Kala Sha'isen, even for a small sin that they do. Kach Nefroin Min HaTzadikim Ba'Elam Hazeh. We also take retribution from the righteous in this world from a small sin, Alavera Kala, from a small sin that Sha'isen that they do. What does this mean? So this is, as we've explained many times, that the wicked get punished in the next world, the righteous get punished in this world, and even for small sins. And the reason for that, of course, is because the punishment in this world, I mean, I always look at it that you get what you want. The wicked, they want a very good Olam Hazeh. They really want this world, the good world, the good time. So therefore they ask for it. So Hashem said, okay, I'll give it to you. The tzaddikim, they know that the world to come is much greater. So they really want their punishment. They want their punishment in this world, and therefore they could have a much greater world to come. So that would seemingly be the meaning. Generally, we just say that it's not because they want it; it's because Hashem wants to give the righteous a better, give them a better olam haba, because that's much more valuable. So he causes their punishment in this world, and the wicked, Hashem wants them to get their reward, their punishment, excuse me, in the world to come. And that's what Hashem does. So in other words, not necessarily connected to the way I see it, that's what the person wants. It's that this is how Hashem chooses to do it. But maybe it's correct. Yes.
There's a song that says you can't always get what you want, but you get what you need.
Well, the way I see it is you get what you want. In other words, this is the way the righteous want and the wicked want. They really get what they want. Now the Gemara continues. The Brisa continues. It says, "Ve'ein avel." The next words of that pasuk in Ha'azinu. It says, "Kel amuna ve'ein avel." There is no crookedness. Hashem doesn't act crooked. Kishem shemashalmin tzchachar letzadikim lo'elam haba. The same thing applies to reward. That the same way that the tzadikim get reward in the next world, I feel a mitzvah kalash, even for a small mitzvah that they do. Tach mishalmin tzchar l'rishoyim. So also, Hashem gives a reward. We give a reward to the wicked. Ba'ilam haza in this world, I feel a mitzvah kalash, even for a small mitzvah that they do, as it says, as it says, tzaddik v'yashar hu. Hashem is tzaddik and yashar. What is tzaddik v'yashar? What does that mean? Tzaddik v'yashar hu. So Rashi says he's matzdik hadin ala tzaddikim. He makes a judgment for the righteous to take punishment from them, and he does yashar with the wicked to give them reward. In other words, both are talking about in this world. So he's tzaddik, he judges the righteous in this world and gives them punishments, and in this world he is yashar to the wicked, and he gives them their reward in this world. That's the understanding of tzaddik v'yashar. Now, the Gemara continues and says, Amru. They said, meaning the rabbis said, when a person passes away to his world, to the next world, call Maisav Nifratin Lefanav. All his actions are detailed in front of him. And they say to him, Sisa, they're not complaining. Such and such a thing you did in this place, on this day. Vehu Oimer Hain. And the person admits and he says, yes, this is correct. Va'imrim Lai, and the angels tell him, Chasoim, sign that you did this. V'choisem, and a person is he signs it. He's sort of forced to sign it. Shnemer, as it says, biyad kol adam yachtoim, in the hand of each person, he signs it. In other words, he knows that this is correct. He signs it. And not only that, he acknowledges and he accepts. He believes that Hashem's judgment is correct. So he, I guess, endorses, or so, there must be some better word for it. Matzdik olav asadin. He endorses Hashem's judgment. Va'omer lahem, and he says to the angels, Yafeh dantuni, you judged me correctly. Shlakayim ashenemar, to fulfill what it says, Laman titzdak v'davrecha, in order that you will be righteous in your doings, in your actions. In other words, that people will acknowledge that you are correct in everything you do. The next Gemara talks about a person who is fasting. Is this considered a good thing or a bad thing when a person fasts? So the Gemara continues and says, Amar Shmuel kol yeshiv Taanis. Shmuel says, any person who is sitting in fast, which basically means that he fasts often. Person who fasts is nikra chayte, is called a sinner. Not a good thing to fast. The Tanya, and he brings a brisa, as it says, it's taught in a brisa. Rabbi Elazar Hakapar Berebi. Rabbi Elazar HaKapor, the great one. Oimer, he says, Ma Talmud Loimar, what does the pasuk say? What is it? What does the pasuk mean when it says by a nazir, the chiper olav? A nazir is a person who separates himself from wine, from going to cemeteries, and from taking a haircut. Olav v'chiper olav me'asher chata ala nefesh. Says Hashem will atone. He will atone on him for sinning on the soul. What does that mean? Sounds like he killed someone, sinning on the soul. So, who did this person kill? Which soul did this person sin against? That Ella, rather, what it means, why he only separated himself from wine and from grapes and wine and from haircuts and from going to a funeral. Who did he kill? Ella shatzir atzmei min hayayin, because he pained himself from wine. And behold, this is a priori argument. Uma zed shaloitzir atzmei ela min hayayin, just like this one, the person who's a nazir, who pained himself from wine, he's called a choite, he's called a sinner. Adam, a matzar atzmai, a person who pains himself, deprives himself. They call davar v'davar from everything. In other words, fasts. Al achas kama v'kama. How much more so is he considered a sinner? Now, this is Shmuel speaking, and he brought a brisa from Rabbi Elazar HaKapor, the great one. Now the Gemara brings Rabbi Elazar Omer. Rabbi Elazar says, Nikra Kadosh, he's actually called holy. So we got, one opinion is that he sins. He's a sinner. Another one says, what do you mean? He's a holy. Shenemar, as it says, Kadosh Yiyah, he will be holy. Gadol Peras Aroshai. The Nazir, who he doesn't take haircuts, he lets his hair grow long. So Gadol Peras Aroshai is Kadosh. It says in the puzzle that he's holy. And he brings another a priori argument. This person only deprived himself from one thing. Nikra Kadesh is called holy because he separated himself from wine. A person who pains him, deprives himself from all, when he fasts, deprives himself from all food and drink. How much more so is he called holy? So the Gemara asks, so what does Shmuel do with this pasuk? Ula Shmuel, who says he's sinning, ha'ikri kadesh, he's called holy. Right? We just brought a verse that says he's holy. So Shmuel answers and he says, Hahu agidol perakoy. That is referring to the hair that is considered kadosh, that when he lets his hair grow, it's almost like like a sacrifice. It becomes it's called holy from the fact that he let his hair grow, and you're not allowed to benefit from the hair. So, but the Nazir himself is not holy. The letting his hair grow, fine. That's an element that becomes like holy. That it's considered kadosh. He can't benefit from it, but he's not considered holy. Then the Gemara asks the question the opposite way. Ula Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Elazar that says that he is called holy. Ha nikra chayte, he's called a chayte. It says he sinned. So the Gemara answers that pasuk. Hahu, that pasuk that says he sinned. It's referring to the sa'iv nafshe, a person who became impure for going and getting by going to a cemetery or going to a dead body, becoming tameh while he's a nazir. That's when he is considered a sinner. So the Gemara explains that there's two extreme views about a nazir. Is this considered appropriate? And that those two views, they manifest themselves, they express themselves also in someone who is fasting. Okay, my time is up, so I wish you all a very good day and a happy Hanukkah and Zay Gesund, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Shabbos
Yeah,
candles.
Hanukkah.
Yeah, that's why it's funny.